Hi there, everyone. It is essential to know how the mists work in Expeditionary company. So David and I have decided that a short video entirely dedicated to them could be very useful. Here I go then. Imagine that in the Expeditionary lands there is always zero density, what we call the perpetual vapor. Rarely the sun manages to pass through this uncomfortable and desolate vapor. It does not cause major damage beyond depression, corrosion, and sore bones. Then there are the dangerous densities, namely white haze, density 1, grey murk, density 2, and black haar, density 3. All of them are the engine of the apocalypse, of the end of the world, the reason why the game is planned to develop over 24 months, because there is no time for more. When there are mists, you have to imagine that everything gets complicated, twisted, aggravated. Let's take by way of example a simple cold. If an adventurer goes out with a cold on the roads of the Expeditionary lands and is trapped by the white haze, that cold may turn into pneumonia. If there is grey murk, it may develop into a major illness, and under the black haar, that adventurer may die because their lungs just stop working. Another example. If a barrel of gold dust falls off a wagon, perhaps luck will cause it to dent only a little. If it falls off while under the influence of white haze, it is sure to break. If this occurs when there is black haar, maybe that barrel breaks out. Additionally, a mule is startled, and with a kick against the wagon wall, two other barrels fall off, breaking as well. If there is rain, well, you guys are getting the idea, aren't you? With white haze, the rain becomes a thunderstorm. With grey murk, the falling water is toxic, and with black haar, it may be even lethal. The same with a leg injury, with a landslide, with a fire, everything, absolute everything is way worse. If a caravan is on a journey without the protection of a belt of gold, anything negative it receives is complicated in the following way. Beyond combat and hazardous situation, which I'll talk about in a minute, keep in mind that any damage that a section of the book tells you a guard, passenger, or draft animal suffers, under the white haze gets an extra 1 life point loss. A wound of 1 life point that you read that a guard suffers, you then write down 2. If a passenger is very depressed and causes his category to lose 2 life points, you reduce it by 3 life points. The penalty under the grey murk, density 2, will be minus 2 life points, and under the black haar will be a 3 life points penalty. If the draft animals are fighting each other, resulting in a loss of 2 life points, in the event that there was black haar, then they lose 5 life points. Do you see how dangerous it is to expose your expeditions to the mists? Of course, in a camp without the protection of a belt of gold, exactly the same thing happens. Surrounded by a belt of gold, then you just receive the plain damage, not the upgraded one. On the other hand, let's talk about the travel stages. The travel stages suffer a 10% traveling speed penalty under white haze, 20% traveling speed penalty under grey murk, and 30% traveling speed penalty when there is black haar. This means that you have to multiply the advanced kilometers, for example, 16 kilometers that you were going to travel one afternoon crossing hills. This is the result of adding the basic distance of 10 kilometers and the result of 1d12 of hills, which this time we imagine to be a 6, so it is 16, and you multiply it by 0.9 when there is white haze. That is, the caravan would travel 14 kilometers instead of 16, or you multiply that advanced kilometers by 0.8 when there is grey murk, advancing 13 kilometers then, and finally, worst case scenario, multiply it by 0.7 when there is black har, only covering 11 kilometers. Don't forget also that when you are not protected by the belt of gold, both in travel stages and in camp stages, there is a higher chance of something happening. Plus 10% is applied to the roll on the table for camp stages and on the roll on the table for travel stages when there is white haze. Plus 20% is if there is grey murk, and a plus 30% if there is black har. This means that if I roll 47 in a travel stage, which would be fine under normal circumstances, with white haze, there is already a problem with the passengers because it is 57. And bear in mind that, as we said before, you will have to apply plus 1 extra damage to whatever, if the section that comes out tells you so. If there was black har, the problem would be with 47, your roll, plus 30, so 77. So I check the table, wagons. Okay, and once again, remember, apply a plus 3 extra damage if it comes out that the vehicles lose some resistance points. The worst thing that can happen both on the roll on the table for camp stages and on the roll on the table for travel stages is that you get a 100 or more. Of course, under normal circumstances, a 100 only comes out 1 out of 100 times. But under white haze, with that plus 10 penalty, there is already an 11%. With grey murk, a 21%, because of that plus 20 penalty. And under black har, there is a 31% of getting 100 or more because of that plus 30 penalty. You must avoid visiting section 53. Section 53 is sometimes just a one-way trip. Let's go now to those times when fate leads the caravan to suffer a confrontation against something, in which the opposing roles come into play. A combat against an enemy using the caravan's combat skill, which is obtained by adding up the caravan combat skills that the traveling guards have. Or a mishap, using the caravan's driving skill or the caravan's survival skill, which is obtained again by adding the driver or survival skills that the traveling guards have. Combat. In this case, as we know, the caravan rolls 2d6 and its combat skill is added. The same with the enemy. It also rolls 2d6 and adds its combat. Some wolves may have combat 2, a giant spider combat 3, or whatever attack the caravan a different value. Results are compared. If the caravan wins, it causes the damage of its combat to the enemy. For example, a caravan with combat 3 causes 3 points of damage to the wolves, spiders, or whatever. If the enemy wins, it generally causes 1 damage to a category of the caravan. The damage location table is used now to determine if the damage is received by a guard, the wagons, the draft animals, or whatever. The special rules of each enemy will add information in this regard, because there are opponents that would not cause damage to the wagons, and there are others that may cause multiple damage. The important thing is that wolves, spiders, or any other enemy, unless otherwise indicated, causes 1 damage. This is where the mists come into play. With the white haze, enemies receive +1 to combat and +1 to the damage they inflict. With the grey murk, the enemies receive +2 to combat and +2 to damage. With the black har, you know it, +3 to combat and +3 to damage. Can you imagine wolves that have combat of 5 and cause 4 damage every time they beat you in an opposing attack roll? Awful bastards indeed! The exact same thing happens with hazardous mishaps. In this case, the caravan must face a series of rounds under a complicated and dangerous situation. When those rounds are over, if the caravan is still standing, it has come out as kind of a winner. But it depends on the damage suffered, right? But still alive to fight another day, friends. Cheer up! Let's look at some examples. The caravan has to cross a stretch of road that is plagued by strange quicksands. The instructions given on the section tell you that these quicksands put a complication of 3, and that it is solved with the caravan's driving skill over 5 rounds. Well, then you make the opposing driving rolls, 2d6 plus the driving of the caravan against 2d6 plus 3 for the quicksand. If the arenas win, the caravan will lose 1 point in some category, the same as in the combats. The damage location roll table is therefore needed. Remember that the special rules of each complication will give you extra details if there are any. If in the opposing driving roll the result is a tie, it is as good as winning, because the round goes by without anything happening, but the wagons advance. And if your caravan win, as said, no damage is caused to the sands, because it is not an enemy. Only 1 round is surpassed without damage. Once the set of rounds specified are over, the danger is over. Kudos to you! The same with a complication with survival. Let's imagine a toxic rain that suddenly ravages your expedition's camp. And the rules state that this rain has a complication against the survival of the caravan of 4 during 10 rounds. My goodness. Then there will be 10 2d6 opposing survival rolls between the caravan survival and the mishap. So roll 2d6 for you and add the caravan survival value against another 2d6 roll plus 4, which is the difficulty of the toxic rain. If the rain wins, it causes 1 point of damage to a category of the caravan. If it is a tie or the caravan wins, 1 turn elapses with everyone getting to safety without further aggravation. Again, the mists come into play. Under the white haze, the complication receives +1 in difficulty, no matter if it is against driving, as in the sands, or against survival, as in the toxic rain, and +1 to damage. With the grey mark, it is +2 to the difficulty of the complication and +2 to the damage, and with the black heart, +3 to the difficulty and +3 to the damage. Can you imagine a toxic rain spurred by the black heart that has complication 7 and does a damage of 4 to a category if it wins? Impossible to overcome. Wow. Finally, let me tell you about the belt of gold. When a caravan uses up a barrel of gold dust to build a circle of protection around its camp, it serves to protect itself from the influence of the mist, that is to say, from the apocalyptic atmosphere that they bring. It's important to note that the belt of gold does not prevent a giant worm from attacking, toxic rain from falling on the wagons, or the earth from moving beneath one's feet. What the belt of gold ensures is that it happens less often, because the +10% of the white haze, the +20% of the great book, or the +30% of the black heart is not applied to the roll on the table for camp stages. But in addition, if you get a section in which there are earth tremors that wreak havoc among the members of your expedition, these tremors are not powered by the eagerness of the mists to end it all. That is, the +1, +2, or +3 of difficulty that the mists add, and the +1, +2, or +3 to the damage are not applied to them. Therefore, it is much more bearable. Imagine the appearance of wildfires in your camp. It is not the same if they arise during 4 rounds and your people have to evade them with a difficulty of 3 than a difficulty of 4 if there is white haze, a difficulty of 5 if there is grey murk, or a difficulty of 6 if there is black heart. And it is not the same either if someone is injured, receiving a wound of 1 life point, or 2, 3, or 4 under the black heart. To sum it all up, the belt of gold is essential to reduce the chances of something terrible happening. And if it does happen, it might not be that horrible. Also, remember, if you roll 100 or more on the table for camp stages, you must visit section 53. And mark my words, you don't want to visit section 53. So, build a belt of gold around your camp. If you have enough barrels of gold dust, of course.